Creating an album seems like a super daunting task, but there are two key components that really kind of help me get through the process. And those are patience and strategy. For me, the patience component basically just means being okay with the process taking like anywhere between 1 and 3 years with lots of trial and error. I'll talk about that a little, but let's get into the strategy part. I want to talk about how I use the Elektron gear that I have, the Digitakt, Digitone, and Octatrack, to work through this process. And now I have individual track breakdowns of some of the tracks that ended up on the album, so you can go check those out. I'll link some in the description. But this video is going to be more focused on the overarching sort of concept and strategic workflow that I implement with those devices. We'll start with how I start building the songs on the hardware and end up in Logic Pro, where I'll show you some of the final tracks. Even if you're not using Elektron gear, you can apply these sort of concepts and strategies to any sort of level of hardware into software implementation to an extent. So over the course of a couple of years, I ended up with a group of songs using the Digitakt, Digitone, and Octatrack, which I'm not going to be showing today. We're going to stick with these two. And I had kind of recorded live performances of them over time and decided I wanted to use these for the album. So in a way, my albums are sort of live in the sense that I'm performing them on these two devices and I have audio out running into Logic Pro. I actually don't use Overbridge, and to be honest, it's pretty much just because I'm lazy with software. I find it more engaging to really work within these devices toward establishing a super tight mix on the hardware so that it's essentially album ready once that mix goes as audio into the DAW. I understand that this is just my preference and it's absolutely not the norm, and you should totally use Overbridge if you like it because it's a really great and powerful tool. I just like tweaking things in hardware more, and I realize that loses me some flexibility, but it also helps me commit to my decisions. So yeah, I'm just gonna hit play here, and I have everything synced up. This is the song Blue Hour, so I have MIDI controlling the Digitone. And these parts are coming from the Digitakt, so I always have drums and sometimes little like melodic samples. And then on the Digitakt, it's really just these two synth tracks. So there's this arpeggio and this little pad, which is sidechained to the kick. And then from this pattern, as I kind of build that out as part of the song, goes into this part. And I don't have everything coming in all at once. Like this intense kind of bouncy track. That's used as part of the build, and it's really amazing what you can do with simple mutes and unmutes and just pattern transitions. I've heard a lot of people say that it feels like cheating, or it doesn't feel like enough work to just like mute and unmute parts during different transitions of a song, but like that's what a lot of music is. And if you listen to any music you like, you'll realize that a lot of what goes on in the background is just a part happening, a part starting, a part stopping. It adds a lot of emphasis. In particular, I love this sound. And here's what it looks like across the whole pattern. And that's the source sample. It's just a one-shot chord that I heard and thought that the sonic characteristic kind of matched the song, and I ended up incorporating it in a way that was totally different from what I initially anticipated. And that's usually how the process largely goes on these two devices. When the Octatrack is in play, I will do a lot more automation and transitions using the crossfader, but I still will do a bulk of like the drum sampling on the Digitakt and then use the Octatrack maybe for more long-form textural background samples. So yeah, that's really it with these two. Once everything is sequenced and kind of put together, I just perform mutes and unmutes after I've sort of mentally structured the song with verses and choruses and other transitions. Sometimes I'll create another pattern to use as a transition. For example, this is another tune where I use this pattern as a transition into the main pattern. And of course, when that sort of main verse pattern comes in, there are only two tracks that are really unmuted, so you get the build. But that's how it works. You have like this hazy ambient transition, and then you just start the song. And I always put those patterns at the back end. But you could put them up front if you want to kind of make sense sequentially, but I will usually program those patterns after the main structure of the song is complete. There's no one right way to do things, of course. So however you like to write your individual songs, you can use these devices to cater to your strengths there. So basically, I just develop multiple tracks like this over the course of any sort of period of time. The album I just released in May, Cinnamon, was developed over the course of like 2.5 years. I think the first track I wrote was in 2019, and I didn't actually start putting it all together until 2022. Now, aside from the shameless plug here, of course, I do genuinely think that potentially listening to this album in the context of this video and thinking about it in that framework could actually help with your workflow and sort of give you ideas and show you how that implementation sort of results in a product. I think it's less than 30 minutes, so go check it out. Anyways, a big concept of this sort of workflow over time as it relates to the patience that I mentioned earlier is not trying to force any cohesion. Unless you're going for like a concept album, which is a different story, I think that a group of songs kind of works to cohese itself over the course of time based on just like where you're at mentally, what sort of samples and actual hardware instruments you're using, what your musical interests are. If you consistently make music over the course of a year or two, that music is going to represent you in it. I recognized when I had a batch of songs that I could sort of identify and whittle down to get a track list for an album. And they all kind of spiritually succeed each other in terms of the progression, and that helps to determine track order. The takeaway here is that what's important is to just put in the time and energy and truly trust in the process. If you just do what excites you and you're having fun, I think that you'll be satisfied with the result. So here's the main track. And things are really, really simple here. So I don't actually have the full version of Logic on my laptop. I use my Mac, so you're not going to see all the plugins on the main channel, but I really just added an EQ, which isn't set to these settings, and then an exciter. But what I want to show you are these tracks that I now have muted, because these are transitions and automations. That is literally just a filter sweep that I recorded from the mini log. To transition into that section, I just overdubbed it. It's really simple and it's a pretty rudimentary way of working, but to be honest, it just works. And here's a little guitar part that I added in. And you can hear I have a little vibrato on that and some reverb. And that guitar was tracked just running through the Chase Bliss Audio Thermae into my Fender Princeton reverb, captured on this SM7B that I'm talking into right now. Similarly, this Genloss ARP pad, which you can see has automation. Again, my automation is so dumb. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I just recorded this pad through the Genloss, again with the mini log, and it just kind of fades in to assist with this transition. And then you can hear it again at the end. And I just took that same chunk and I literally looped it and then faded it out at the end. So as you can see, a DAW dummy like myself can just make simple things happen. This is why I like to focus on hardware, because that's where I excel. That's what I'm good at. And I can use the software to do stuff that isn't as easy to do in a live performance setting. I do spend quite a bit of time experimenting with different plugins and getting different sounds from the additional tracks that I add. But at the end of the day, I just keep it super simple, like with the simple vibrato and Space Designer reverb. So yeah, cat's out of the bag. Don't ask me for help with the DAW. So this is really kind of the most creative part of the process, because you're just adding embellishments and transitions. It can be really easy, like I said, to get overzealous and just like go crazy with adding different layers and tracks and transitions, but you want to remember to serve the song and keep in mind the structure, like the bones, the skeleton of the song that you developed in your hardware. After that process is all said and done and you're happy with the actual arrangement and composition, you just have to listen. Listen on every device you can. Listen on laptop speakers, on AirPods, on phone speakers, in a car, in your friend's car if you can. This will kind of just give you reference in terms of what sounds might be coming through in certain contexts and what might not be coming through. And you want to be able to take that information and then adjust your mix to achieve a balance. But yeah, pay attention to the volume of things, get things to where you're comfortable and it sounds balanced on multiple different sources. And then I can't speak to mastering. I've never done it. So I have somebody master for me. Actually, one really important thing to do before you send it to get mastered is obviously decide on a track order, which I touched on a bit earlier. But I think something that's really important, at least to me, and something that sticks out to me and really draws me into the albums that I love, is deciding what the first track is. In my opinion, the first track should do two things. It should first set the mood. You want to put your listener in a certain headspace to kind of ingest the rest of the tracks. And I also think that a good first track tends to be a good representation of what the album is kind of about sonically. So for example, Cinnamon has some like quirky, bouncy fun tunes, but it also has some kind of like darker, more mysterious, hazy, and like brooding dance stuff. So the first track, the title track, is kind of all of that. Like it has like a very bouncy sort of like swelling rhythm to it, but it's also really dark and hazy. I really tried to find the song that I thought was the best balance thematically, and also that I wanted to, again, set up the listener's headspace when consuming the music. I hope this was a helpful overview. I realized it's very rudimentary and kind of more conceptual than it is practical tips, but I think that keeping these things in mind can kind of show you that you don't have to be like a super whiz at navigating software. And what really kind of matters is just the quality of the source material that you're using, the synths, the samples. You want it to sound good before you even record it. If it sounds good before it's laid down, it's gonna sound good every time you play it back. If you made it to the end of the video, tell me your Taco Bell order and go check out my Patreon. Peace.